songs as I write you this letter. Days past and days yet to come, and the message of freedom. The message of freedom. I stand at the
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I know you might be expecting to see and to hear the voice of candidate for governor in West Virginia, Mike Folk. If you were unable to tune in yesterday, Mike is on the road today and unable to be with us, but he does have a couple of videos that he wants to share with us today. Matt Miller's sitting in, and I'll be plugging those in as we get going. The first thing that he wanted me to share with you was a video that we had queued up yesterday, but just never quite got an opportunity to get to. Mike wanted to start the day with a little bit of humor, and we will get that started right now as we bring you just a portion of a speech from Ronald Reagan.
Collecting stories that are told in the Soviet Union by their people among themselves, which reveal they've got a great sense of humor, but they've also got a pretty cynical attitude toward their system. And I told this one, Bill, you'll have to hear it again. I told it in the car. I didn't tell this one to Gorbachev. You know, there's a 10-year delay in the Soviet Union of delivery of an automobile. And only 1 out of 7 families in the Soviet Union own automobiles. There's a 10-year wait. And you go through quite a process when you're ready to buy, and then you put up the money in advance. And this happened to a fella, and this is their story that they tell, this joke, that this man, he laid down his money, and then the fella that was in charge said to him, okay, come back in 10 years and get your car. And he said, morning or afternoon? And the fellow behind the counter said, well, 10 years from now, what difference does it make? And he said, well, the plumber's coming in the morning. I just want to, I can't resist. I'm supposed to quit right here. But, yes. But in view of the fast things that I just said, I don't know whether you know it or not, but I have a new hobby. I am collecting stories that I can actually prove are told among the Russian people. They make them up themselves, they tell them between themselves, reveals they got a great sense of humor, and they've also got a little cynical attitude about things in their country. And one of these stories, the one I'm going to tell you, I told to General Secretary Gorbachev, and he laughed. The story was an American and a Russian arguing about their two countries, and the American said, look, in my country, I can walk into the Oval Office, I can pound the president's desk and say, Mr. President, I don't like the way you're running our country. And the Russian said, I can do that. The American said, you can? He says, yes. I can go into the Kremlin, to the General Secretary's office, pound his desk and say, Mr. General Secretary, I don't like the way President Reagan's running his country. You know, less than 1 family out of 7 in the Soviet Union owns an automobile. Most of the automobiles are driven by the bureaucrats. The government furnishes them and drivers and so forth. So an order went out one day to the police that anyone caught speeding, anyone, no matter who, gets a ticket. Well, Gorbachev came out of his country home, his dacha. He was late getting to the Kremlin. There was his limousine and driver waiting. He told the driver to get in the back seat, he'd drive, and down the road he went. They passed 2 motorcycle cops. One took out after him. And pretty soon he's back with his buddy, and his buddy says, well, did you give him a ticket? And he said, no. Well, he said, why not? Oh, he said, they're too important. Well, he said, we're told to give anybody a ticket, no matter who it is. Oh, he said, no, this one was too, Well, he said, who was it? He said, I couldn't recognize him, but his driver was Gorbachev. One of the more recent ones that I heard was about the man walking along the street at night, Moscow, Soviet soldier called to him to halt. He started to run. The soldier shot him. And another man said, "Why did you do that?" Well, he said, "Curfew." Well, he said, "It isn't curfew yet." He said, "I know. He's a friend of mine. I know where he lives. He couldn't have made it." I heard one about a fellow who went to the KGB to report that he lost his parrot. The KGB asked him why he was bothering them. Why didn't he just report it to the local police? Well, he answered, "I just want you to know that I don't agree with a thing my parrot has to say." Which makes me think of a story. Everything makes me think of a story. About 3 dogs, an American dog and a Polish dog and a Russian dog. They were all having a visit, and the American dog was telling them about how things were in this country. He said, "You know, you bark and you bark long enough, and then somebody comes along and gives you some meat." And the Polish dog said, "What's meat?" The Russian dog says, "What's bark?" I have to interrupt right here and tell you that in one of my visits, I won't name him, I don't want to embarrass him, but one of the heads of state that I met with on this visit, he gave me one while I was on the way. Told me the story about the 2 fellows in the Soviet Union that were walking down the street, and the one of them says, "Have we really achieved full communism? Is this it? Is this now full communism?" And the other one said, "Oh, hell no, things are going to get a lot worse."
Well, there you go. Just a few jokes from Ronald Reagan, something to lighten the mood as we get going today. Again, Matt Miller sitting in. Mike Folk is out today. We do want you to stay with us, though. Mike has a particular video that he wanted to share with everyone today, and we will take a look at that after we take this time out.
Turn me loose, I say.
The Chinese coronavirus is hurting our economy and our state. It's the thanks we get after China stole our jobs and ripped off our patents. And that's not all. Thrasher and Justice are pushing a deal giving China an $84 billion stake in West Virginia's valuable energy resources. More China scams we don't need. Woody Thrasher and Jim Justice, 2 China sellouts. First, Justice and Thrasher pushed the biggest tax hike ever. Then Thrasher and Justice endorsed bringing refugees to West Virginia. And now an $84 billion sellout to China. Stop them. Mike Folk for governor, the conservative champion to put West Virginia first.
I'm Mike Folk. Justice and Thrasher's $84 billion sellout to China is even worse than their taxes and open border policies. West Virginia needs a governor who will put West Virginia first. I'm Mike Folk, Republican for governor. That's why I'm running.
Mike Folk for governor, the conservative champion to put West Virginia first. Paid for by Folk for Governor.
The level of care that I got at WVU Medicine was top-notch.
If you're not progressing in healthcare, you're falling behind.
Is really an integration, looking at a clinical care network, looking at the good people who can help push the envelope and raise the bar for delivering a quality healthcare product.
To have my life back is absolutely a blessing. I am beyond thankful for WVU Medicine. I absolutely 100% have my life back.
When will I be able to retire? How do I make the most of the money I have? How do I leave a lasting legacy to my loved ones? I'm Philip McCoy, financial advisor with the Mirius Group, a private wealth advisory practice of Ameriprise Financial Services Incorporated. Call us today at 304-263-4343 to help you make the most of your financial future. Our office is located at 1270 Winchester Avenue, Martinsburg, West Virginia.
Ameriprise Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
Orsini's, not just an appliance store anymore. They're your one-stop resource for all home needs, whether it's custom kitchen design, countertops, or cabinets, or check out their new sleep studio with Tempur-Pedic, Sealy, and Stearns & Foster. For all of your outdoor living needs, Orsini's has Gladiator Garage Works, Traeger grills, barbecue accessories, barbecue rubs and sauces, and every flavor wood pellets. Visit their brand new 8,200 square foot showroom at 360 Hack Wilson Way, 304-267-7251, Orsinis.com.
prepare for what's next or to plan ahead. We're here. Brown Funeral Home, a legacy of service since 1880.
Well, Matt Miller with you, sitting in today as Mike Folk is on the road. He does have a video that he wants to share with us, and at this time we'll jump right into that video. Here we go.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Chris Martenson here with your SARS-CoV-2 daily update. It's April 22nd, 2020. This is day 90 of our coverage. Today I'm going to dive into the hydroxychloroquine controversy. And if you're in the United States or perhaps a few other Western countries, you might think there is no controversy. It doesn't work. But boy, are you going to be shocked when I show you the actual results of what we're talking about here. I am fighting a war to have facts and reason and logic and science come back into the conversation. I have seen some of the worst, I have to put quotes around this word, ready? Science, that I've seen in a long time just coming out. And we tore some of that apart the other day with that ridiculously bad Stanford study on the seroprevalence in the Santa Clara County area of California. And that, of course, has been retracted. Guess what? There were some statistical errors they had to address. No way. Really? At any rate, let's go here to the April 21st cases. Remember yesterday, if you were watching this, I said, wow, it looks like the United States is really getting its arms around it. The cases were down. New deaths were way under this number, this 2,800. So they all just came roaring back. And I don't know if that's just Monday gets reported less or something. I've noticed there's a little frequency to this now. At any rate, United States closing in on 1 million cases of its own at some point here at 25,000 a day. Let's just see. 8 more days, so we get there. At any rate, very, very far ahead of any of the other countries here. But when we look at this and total cases on a per 1 million population, so that normalizes it to the population of a country, the United States, it's kind of in the middle of the pack of countries that are getting hit hard here. So Spain has over 4,300 people out of 1 million have been impacted by this. Belgium, 3,500 down here. Italy, just a little over 3,000. France at 2,400, almost identical to the United States there. Switzerland, 3,243, pretty high. And about the same as Ireland at 3,248. So when we look at that on an adjusted basis, or deaths per 1 million population here, the only real standouts are 2 countries whose reporting I don't exactly trust at this point in time, but we'll just have to wait for that to settle out a little bit. We'll see where those all finally end up. All right, so when we look at the total new cases, I said that they had flatlined yesterday. Indeed, they seem to have flatlined. There's really no, some people were saying, well, it looks like it's rolling over. That may be true, but we don't have data for that yet right now. So if we look at this, here we were on March 30th, right there. We're at the exact same spot. So really no difference from March 30th here till April 22nd. So nearly a month, about the same number of cases. And so that's fighting 2 trends. Of course, that's fighting the natural trend of the honey badger virus to want to just continue to grow exponentially. And of course, all of the beautiful, wonderful social distancing and mask wearing and other NPIs that are pulling everything this way. And it sort of averages out on a flat line. So kind of at a draw right now is how I'm looking at this. Hey, Trump came out and tweeted a plan this morning, and his plan was he's instructed the United States Navy to shoot down and destroy any and all Iranian gunboats if they harass our ships at sea. And unfortunately, it looks like that's already come to pass. All right, listen, I got to put some levity in here. I'm not, again, if you hate the fact that I've just picked on Trump, or you love the fact I've just picked on Trump, you missed the point. I'm not left-right. I go up-down. I really don't care. Yeah, if you like or hate the fact that I'm picking on Trump, you probably would have reversedly hated or liked the fact that I picked on Obama and Bush before that. I'm very equal opportunity because what I care about is, are you doing sensible things or not? So I want to talk to you today about hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine itself. Here's the deal on it, okay? Here's the deal. We're going to take us through some of the anecdotal stuff and the most recent study, I'm using that word lightly, that came out. I'm going to pick that apart, same as I did for the Stanford study. So here's the deal. All antivirals, they work best early on in the disease. Earlier the better, right? Later does no good. So this would include everything. If you were going to take what Tamiflu, say, and you're taking it for the flu, it does no good if you're already in bed and you've been in bed for a week and you take Tamiflu. It doesn't do anything. And when they set up the Tamiflu studies, they were looking, hey, if we can give this to people early in the course of the disease, does this help? And of course, that's when an antiviral would help. You want to prevent the virus from replicating. It's the replication of the virus that causes the damage. The drug doesn't come and fix it after your body's all loaded with viral particles. The drugs that work, antivirals, do best if they can prevent the virus from exploding in population inside your body. Makes sense, right? Okay. So all antivirals work early on in the disease. Zinc is an important cofactor in the antiviral activity of cells, and in particular around chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, because that has a couple of functions. One, it gets into lysosomes and it changes the pH there, and it prevents all kinds of things from happening for the plasmodia in malaria from being able to digest the hemoglobin, as well as preventing the lysosomes into which the virus particles are going in order to begin their escape Houdini act to get into the cell body. It does that, but zinc, important cofactor as well for preventing viral replication inside the cell. And how does zinc get inside a cell? Because of the ionophore activity, ionophore. The 4 means a hole of some kind, ion. So the hydroxychloroquine, it acts as an ionophore and allows zinc to move between cells, and there makes little holes in their cell walls, is also into cells. So it's really important. Okay, here's the deal. Virtually every study on hydroxychloroquine in the U.S., as well as some that I've seen out of Europe, has been given to already sick patients, maybe even already intubated. It's not been given early. It's been given very late in the cycle. And virtually every U.S. study I've seen so far has neither included zinc nor mentioned why not. Not even to say, you know what, we didn't bother mentioning it because, or we didn't want to confound our study, so we didn't include it because, or anything like that. It's as if these study designers are completely clueless about the role in interaction and cofactor nature of zinc with hydroxychloroquine. And so that's a very bizarre oversight, right? And so I guess I mislabeled this. So at any rate, to give this stuff too late, and to not include zinc, those are, this should read, and I'm just going to have to fix that, numbers 1 and 2 buff. I think I mislabeled this when I was editing this. Yeah, that's better. All right. So these are deliberate actions or exclusions. You know, when you're designing a study and you're looking to figure out if something works in the clinical setting or not, you have to design it so, you know, when you give the drug is very important, as well as how much, right? And how often. Those 3 things, right, are really critical. So the fact that we've seen these hydroxychloroquine studies where they're giving it sort of random all over the place, like sort of a last gasp. Oh, you know, this patient was doing really badly, so what the heck, Hail Mary, we tried some hydroxychloroquine. Look, didn't work, right? This really ignores the overall antiviral best practices, which is they work best early in the disease, not late. In fact, they may be no good later on. All right. Maybe even harmful if they have side effects that are worse than nothing. Okay. And then not including zinc. Okay, so we've seen a lot of deliberate actions. This is an action or an exclusion here. All right. All studies that purport to be definitive in this case are actually garbage if they're not controlling for the timing of the dosing and measuring or controlling zinc serum levels. Okay. So here's some anecdotal stuff out of this. This isn't even an anecdote this time. French doctor Didier Raoult, and we're going to explore this hydroxychloroquine mystery here. So here's what he says in this recent YouTube video. He says, We've treated here at the IHU Méditerranée Infection more than 3,000 patients. That's a pretty big study also so far. 2,600 were treated with our protocol, hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin, of which 10 died, which means that we have a mortality rate under 0.5% for now. And this is 0.5% of people who are showing up at the hospital. This is indeed, as he puts it, one of the most spectacular results in the world right now. This is amazing, okay? Is it true? Is it not true? Well, they have all the data to back it up, so it looks like it's true so far. So what do we make of that? As well, note that they didn't treat everybody. You know why there's 400 missing patients there? Because they're also, of course, doing very good clinical work to say, listen, people who've got QT prolongation, a heart rhythm prolongation, are excluded from this. People who are on certain other drug compounds that would be a bad cross with hydroxychloroquine are excluded. So not everybody gets it, but of those who did get it, so far, 2,600 treated, 10 died, a 0.5% mortality rate. Pretty cool, right? Costa Rica is also on the anecdote side right now. To add to that, this came out on April 22nd. Costa Rica is using hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19 treatment. And the country's medical experts confirmed this recently, that Costa Rica is using hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID-19 patients. The drugs used in Costa Rica follows the guidance of medical experts from China, where the novel coronavirus is believed to have originated. In Costa Rica, we have been using hydroxychloroquine since we had a teleconference meeting with personnel from China, personnel from Shanghai and Wuhan, said Mario Ruiz, medical manager of the Costa Rican Social Security System. The Costa Rican health system has not released data comparing the outcomes of patients treated with hydroxychloroquine to other methods, but it suggested positive results. The drug has proven to be successful in patients who have been treated currently. So that's all we got. That's why I put it as an anecdote. They haven't released the data yet. So I wandered over to Costa Rica's results and said, well, can we detect anything in their macro data right now? Here's the case fatality rate of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Here's the rest of the world. And remember, we have this mysterious climb through time up here to about 7%. Look at Costa Rica over the same amount of time. Right around here, I believe they started their hydroxychloroquine protocols early, because I have a picture of some doctors in masks from March 13th, right around, I guess that would be here. And they were on a teleconference with people from China at that point in time, so that's where they might have gotten their information. And this is very clear difference. I mean, no, if nothing else, science, logic would say, wow, look at the rest of the world, look at Costa Rica. Let's call Costa Rica up. Anybody got a number here? Let's dial them up and see what they're doing, because there's a huge and obvious difference between these two results right here. Just gigantic. Okay, so again, but it's anecdotal. So what do? There was recently a hydroxychloroquine, a troubling story that came out. It was a study, and it was just splashed everywhere. And this came out on the 21st, today being the 22nd. Washington Post headline screams hydroxychloroquine shows no benefit for coronavirus patients. AP News says more deaths, no benefit from malaria drug and VA virus study. More deaths and no benefit. That's awful. CNN, hydroxychloroquine study finds no benefit, higher death rate. Fox News, COVID-19 treatment, hydroxychloroquine showed no benefit. MarketWatch, hydroxychloroquine as treatment for COVID-19 shows no benefit. And even Science News here, more evidence hints hydroxychloroquine doesn't help treat COVID. All right, that's the news that came out. And so let's take a closer look at this study. This is how CNN characterized it here. It says coronavirus patients taking hydroxychloroquine, a treatment touted by President Trump. So you can feel the political angle on this. I don't like politics mixed up with my science, ever. This shouldn't be a Republican versus Democrat thing, not left-right. Does this drug work? Yes or no? Up, down. That's how we should be taking this. Were no less likely to need mechanical ventilation and had higher rates death rates compared to those who did not take the drug. Oh, that's very damaging. According to a study of hundreds of patients at U.S. Veterans Health Administration medical centers. The study, which reviewed veterans' medical charts, reviewed veterans' medical charts. This is a study that actually, okay, that's your first clue. Something's a little off in this story. They didn't actually design a study with veterans where they were giving them stuff. They reviewed medical charts. So that confounds things quite a bit, and I'll show you why. Was posted Tuesday on medrxiv.org, a preprint server, meaning it was not peer-reviewed or published in a medical journal. That didn't stop anybody here from concluding anything. These were very strong, decisive statements. If you read through these, and by the way, I didn't collect these. I just typed in a Google search term, and these were literally the first 6 results that came up. So on the entire front page of that Google return, you would have read it and completely been forgiven for coming away thinking, oh my God, hydroxychloroquine does not work, because this is very definitive. More deaths, no benefit. That's what it says right here. But when you read a little further, we find out it's not been peer-reviewed yet or published in a medical journal. The research was funded by the NIH and the University of Virginia. In the study of 368 patients, 97 patients who took hydroxychloroquine had a 27.8% death rate. The 158 patients who did not take the drug had an 11.4% death rate. Oh my God, that's just so damaging. Look, twice the death rate here. Look at this. Twice the death rate from hydroxychloroquine as compared to people who didn't take it. All right, that's what got reported. So you know what I like to do. I like to go right to the study itself. I don't like reading interpretations of the study, so let's go there. Here's the study. I'm going to call it pure garbage here, and I'm going to qualify and explain why that is. So it was titled Outcomes of Hydroxychloroquine Usage in the United States Veterans Hospitalized with COVID-19. Here are the authors here. Let's take a quick peek, make sure we know who everybody here is. All right. So you got PharmD people in here. You got MDs, and I don't know who these PhDs and things are. But at any rate, let's go right to the study, the conclusions. Here they are, very definitive, and I can understand why all of these articles got written this way, because if you went to the conclusions, this is what you read. It says, in this study, we found no evidence that use of hydroxychloroquine, either with or without azithromycin, reduced the risk of mechanical ventilation in patients hospitalized with COVID-19. So it didn't do anything about whether or not you had to be ventilated. An association of increased overall mortality was identified in patients treated with hydroxychloroquine alone. That's very damning. These findings highlight the importance of awaiting the results of ongoing prospective randomized controlled studies before widespread adoption of these drugs. Yes, awaiting the results of ongoing prospective randomized controlled studies. So this is interesting because they're saying here these findings highlight the importance of implying that these findings are themselves based on the results of prospective randomized controlled studies. Now, is that really the case? Because if they're not drawing their data from randomized controlled studies, then these findings do nothing of the sort to highlight anything of the sort. Okay, so let's dig in a little further. All right, this is in the methods section, so that's really important. What are the methods? You know, how did they do this? So it turned out there was no actual study. They went into the medical charts, the electronic medical charts of a bunch of patients who'd been in the VA. So first question, how did they select the 368 cases that they decided to use? Which ones did they not include, right? All of that stuff, right? So that's part one. Part two, let's look at this now. Baseline demographic and comorbidity characteristics were comparable across the 3 treatment groups. So they're saying, yep, the baseline demographic and comorbidity. By the way, the baseline demographic is male and African American. That's pretty much their baseline demographic here. They had to exclude women because there were too few of them in this particular study. A VA study makes sense, I guess, but still, that's a key thing to sort of leave out of that particular sentence right there. However, you know how it is. You know how it is when however is to me is like the word but when somebody's giving you a compliment or saying something about like, hey Chris, you're a great guy and I really like you a lot, but turns out you can ignore everything before the but as complete BS usually. However, often fills that same role. However, hydroxychloroquine with or without azithromycin was more likely to be prescribed to patients with more severe disease. as assessed by baseline ventilatory status and metabolic and hematologic parameters. Do you get this? You see what just happened here? Hydroxychloroquine, with or without azithromycin, was more likely to be prescribed to patients with more severe disease. Okay. All right. So, all right, this is why it has to be randomized, people. This is why it has to be controlled, because what's happening here, what they're saying, let me interpret this for you. Doctors are faced with patients, they're crashing, they're in very serious condition. You know, they're maybe either already on ventilators or headed that way. And Hail Mary, last ditch, they threw some hydroxychloroquine at them, right? So they're admitting here, right up front, that HCQ was more likely to be prescribed to patients with more severe disease. Well, how are you going to untangle that confounding factor, right, from anything that you find afterwards? Very, very hard to do. So I love this. Thus, as expected, increased mortality was observed in patients treated with hydroxychloroquine, both with and without azithromycin. Yes. So what did you do about that? Because you just told us that hydroxychloroquine, more people died on it, but now you're telling us that's maybe because they had more severe disease. So how did you control that in order to get back to and give us these conclusions right here, right? I just need to know how we get to this particular conclusion here, that patients who took hydroxychloroquine had a much, much higher death rate. So how did you control for that? Well, let's see. Nevertheless, the increased risk of overall mortality in the HCQ only group persisted after adjusting for the propensity of being treated with the drug. How do you adjust for that statistically? How would you adjust for the propensity of being treated with the drug? That's a good question. And you know what? This paper doesn't tell you how they did that adjustment. There's no way to assess the adjustment. They just tell you they adjusted for it. And even after they did that, they came up with their explosive finding. All right, cool. All right, so here's what else we found in the study methods. All right, I read through the whole method section. Here's what we know and what we don't know. We have no idea how much hydroxychloroquine or azithromycin in milligram. No idea how much patients were dosed with HCQ. We have no idea. Was it a single dose? Was it 500 milligrams? None of that. Neither do we know how often they were dosed with HCQ. It's not disclosed anywhere. Was it once? Was it every day? Was it 2x per day? Was it anybody who had any exposure to HCQ? Maybe they were on rheumatoid arthritis medication, so they had a very, very low dose of this. Did that count? We have no idea. But most damning, we have no idea when the patients were dosed with HCQ. Was it 3 days after symptom onset? 2 days after going on a ventilator? We simply have no idea. We don't know how much. We don't know how often. We don't know when. Without that stuff, I'm going to back all the way up, and I'm going to tell you what I said all the way up at the beginning. This is pure garbage. But garbage in the sense that, you know what? Actually, garbage has value. This doesn't have any value. You couldn't read this as a medical practitioner and derive anything from it. You couldn't derive, is there a higher dose that might have been better, a lower dose? Did it make any difference when they were dosed? There's none of that. You can't determine any of that stuff, so you can't conclude anything from it. In fact, we have tons of anecdotal data now. This is from a critical care medical doctor. Says on this, talking about hydroxychloroquine. Anecdotally, I spoke with a friend who's in touch with an ICU doc in New York City. They are using Plaquenil, which is hydroxychloroquine, for early stagers, and say everyone gets better when their symptoms are pre-respiratory failure stage. After that point, however, and it doesn't work. So totally willing to say that, and that I think that's entirely probably true at this point in time. But this study didn't tell us when. Didn't tell us when the patients were dosed. They could have been dosed anytime, including post-respiratory failure stage, and then they concluded it didn't work. Of course it didn't work. The virus has already done us damage, and an antiviral inhibitory compound will do no good at that point in time. So how do you not know that? All right. This I found in the discussion section. Nope, already talked about that one. Sorry. So there's one thing I wanted to point out about this. I love this part. They said, nevertheless, the increased risk of overall mortality in the hydroxychloroquine-only group persisted after adjusting for the propensity of being treated with a drug. And that's an interesting thing that they claimed in the discussion, but I went all the way down to table 4 and I found this really super interesting table they had, which was patients received treatment at different time periods during hospitalization. This table documents outcomes based upon pre-ventilation treatment. So we don't know if the patients were really bad and just about to go on ventilators, but if you tease out all the patients who received hydroxychloroquine or hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin before they went on a ventilator. Again, we don't know if that means they were minutes away from going on or if they managed to do this a week before. But at any rate, this gets rid of some of that confoundedness around the whole thing. So what happens when we find out with people with hydroxychloroquine, HCQ plus azithromycin, or no hydroxychloroquine? And by the way, they also forgot to tease out that there are a bunch of people in here who also, it was 30 out of the 177, were had azithromycin. So they didn't tease those apart into a separate category. So that's not good. But at any rate, so look at this. There were 90 patients here who had hydroxychloroquine, 101 who had both of these two things, and 177 who had no hydroxychloroquine. They may or may not have had azithromycin. We don't know from this table. So the ventilation number, and then in brackets percent. So 12 of these people progressed to ventilators. That's 13.3%. 7 of these people progressed to ventilators. That's 6.9%. So that's fewer. That's vastly fewer. 25 of these people, or 14.1%, went on ventilation. But again, some of these may have had azithromycin. Well, 30 of them did. So we don't know how to interpret these results. That's called bad science. There should have been a fourth column here, AZ alone. But at any rate, this p-value 0.547 is not. There's no this isn't statistically significant. There's no difference. There's no difference between any of these three treatments as this quote-unquote study was configured, where the doses, the timing, and frequency were not controlled for or understood or maybe even known. At least they didn't disclose them. What about people that progressed to death without any ventilation? Well, 9 of these unfortunate souls, or 10%, because 9 is 10% of 90. 11 of these people, which was 10.9%. 15 of these people, which is 8.4%. There's no statistical difference between any of these numbers. They're not even remotely 10, 10.9, 8.4, the same number. How about if they were discharged without ventilation? These are people who got better. They didn't die. They didn't need ventilation. That's all awesome. 69 of these people, 83, 137. So again, 76.7, 82.2, 77.4. So the conclusion you would have drawn from this, if you were to have reported this, would have read, hey, there's actually no difference at all in outcomes for hydroxychloroquine or hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin if people are treated at some random moment before ventilation. That's not quite as sexy as saying we had twice as many deaths on hydroxychloroquine as we had on no hydroxychloroquine. But again, why did that happen? Oh, probably because hydroxychloroquine was more likely to be prescribed to patients with more severe disease. So they didn't control for that, or they controlled for it in a way that led to the conclusion they wanted to come up with, which was, hey, this stuff just doesn't work. Here again, excuse me one second. This is from their discussions all the way at the back. It says here, our study has certain limitations. You always got to disclose these, including those inherent to all retrospective analyses, such as non-randomization of treatments. And then they move on. Here's that word, however. Remember, just like the word but. No. Before we get to the however, our study has certain limitations, such as non-randomization of treatments. Listen, if the doctors are not randomizing this and they have a patient who's crashing and they're on a ventilator or just about to go on one and they decide to Hail Mary some hydroxychloroquine, that's why you have to have the randomization of the patients, because the doctors are going to be biased and influenced, and of course they are. That's their job. They're trying to save patients. They're not trying to collect data. But your job as somebody who's looking back through that is to understand that the non-randomization is an extraordinary source of bias in a study, and you've got to be exceedingly upfront and clear about how you are controlling for that confounding factor. Did they do that here? I don't know, because they didn't disclose it. They didn't discuss how they went about it. They just said, oh, we did it, and we found a huge result anyway. Yeah. We did, however, adjust for a large number. There's that, however. You're a great guy, Chris, but we did, however, adjust for a large number of COVID-19 relevant co-founders, including comorbidities, medications, clinical and laboratory abnormalities. Despite propensity score adjustment for a large number of relevant co-founders, we cannot rule out the possibility of selection bias or residual confounding. Oh, well, that would have been a really handy thing to put all the way up in your conclusions up top before all those articles got written saying these sorts of things. Because what that sentence just says, to decode that, despite propensity score adjustment, again, how did they do that? Who the hell knows? We cannot rule out the possibility of selection bias or residual confounding. Oh, that means this study didn't really find anything. But if you torture the data long enough, you can come up with something. And the only reason I'm bothering to tear all this apart is because it has huge impacts, right? There are doctors today who've read this stuff, who, maybe are predisposed against hydroxychloroquine for political reasons because Trump mentioned it, who are going to use this as an excuse not to use this stuff, right? And that may cost lives if it turns out that everything that Didier Raoult is coming up with is true, if everything that Costa Rica is coming up with is true as well. We're seeing lots of other doctors use this stuff. The anecdotes I pointed out here in the ICU in New York, I've seen Texas nursing home patients were treated with it with great effect, on and on and on. But again, only if you got it in early, and dosed frequently or had a controlled dosing and you knew how much you were giving. These things are really important. All right. I really wish that this had been picked up more. I hate bad science. All right. What would we do to improve the VA study? All right. First, has to be a randomized trial. Full stop, right? The doctors can't be selecting patients either consciously or unconsciously with any sort of bias, because the bias will always come in and confound your results. If you want to know what's going on, you need the data, which means you need a randomized trial. And then second, we would want to see treatment begun as soon as you have a COVID diagnosis or upon symptoms appearing that are consistent with COVID. You've got the dry cough, you got a little bit of fever, maybe you got a headache, whatever those the collection, the constellation of symptoms are. You begin that as soon as possible. Why? Because it's an antiviral. That's when you give antivirals, as soon as possible. The doses would all be recorded, as well as the dosing frequency. That would be important to know. I would want to see zinc included and the blood levels for zinc tracked. I haven't seen that tracked ever. I mean, in fact, I would want, so when I go to my functional medicine, a naturopath, and they draw blood because they're very data centric, and then they draw that blood and they run it through this full lab panel, and everything is tracked because they're a naturopath, so they understand micronutrients actually matter. So you see my selenium levels, calcium, magnesium, is there any lead in the blood, zinc, all of the major metals and micronutrients and things like that, all your B vitamins, how much vitamin D you got circulating, is there any D dimer? I mean, everything. So in somewhere in that blood data, there's going to be a pattern that can emerge. And so I would want to see the zinc levels recorded, but I would want to see all the levels recorded. Then we put that into our big data AI algorithms, and something's going to pop out which says, oh my gosh, if people had low D3 plus zinc below a certain level, the attack of this virus was 3 times worse. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing there, but there's something in that data that this data isn't being collected or tracked at this point in time. It's a ridiculous oversight. You know how much that blood panel cost me? $100. Why aren't we spending that $100 per day with people who are severely impacted in order to get that full suite of data so that we can begin to parse through at least some of the macro stuff to at least exclude it. Say, you know what? Turns out zinc levels had 0 impact on any of this stuff. Great. Now we can move on. That wasn't it. What's the next thing? But we don't know. And the final thing is you would either do this with or without azithromycin if you really wanted to parse it out. But why bother with the without if it's not doing any harm? Just include it. So that would be how to improve the VA study. And if we did that, if we had a randomized trial, the treatment began as soon as COVID diagnosis started or on symptom recording, doses were recorded and the frequency, we're collecting all this blood level data, but zinc is included in the study. Zinc sulfate seems to be a big thing. Why not include it? Doesn't hurt. Same thing with azithromycin. Doesn't hurt. Include it. If you do all that, then you know what would happen? I'll tell you what. Then we'd know. And once we knew, we could either say this is a frontline treatment, or it's not as good as something else, or something. But we just leave it in the dirt. Doesn't work. Then we'd know. So if you hear something creeping into my voice, it's the absolute lack of scientific rigor, and it's the absolute lack of any sort of questioning or understanding of basic science here, even in sciencenews.org. They softened it up a little bit and said more evidence hints. But this isn't evidence. You know why it's not evidence? Because this study was just done so poorly, and there's nothing. I can't tell anything from this. I can't tell anything. It's not a single thing. All right. So I would want to see more questioning in the media about these things. All right. As well, I just, I hate to raise this stuff, but, it's part of life. People have conflicts of interest. They occur all the time. I just want to note that on April 2nd, UVA, which was the funded this particular hydroxychloroquine study we're just looking at, they joined the national trial to test potential COVID-19 medication, which was, of course, this remdesivir. But I just wanted to point this out because, okay. Hospitalized adult patients with COVID-19 and significant symptoms are going to be testing this potential new medication, remdesivir, including difficulty breathing, using supplemental oxygen, or needing a ventilator. Can now choose to participate in the trial. But look at this. Difficulty breathing is early in this. That might be a symptom that appears a week or 2 weeks before hospitalization. Using supplemental oxygen, again, this is early. So now they're parsing it out. Now they're saying they're going to use remdesivir, but they're going to include it all the way back here when an antiviral ought to be used way back early in the overall treatment of this thing, right? And secondarily, the trial will evaluate the safety and effectiveness of remdesivir. It has blah, blah, blah. Participants in the trial will be randomly assigned to either receive remdesivir or a placebo. Oh, there it is. There it is. You see what they're doing here? They're randomizing the trial. So now we're going to get data off of this one that at least we can do something with, right? Because that has to happen. So they're giving this full sort of kid glove treatment, or maybe what you would call standard treatment, to remdesivir, but they didn't afford the same treatment to hydroxychloroquine. Not even close. Trial participants and their doctors will not know whether the patients are receiving the medication or a placebo. Very important. Patients will otherwise receive the current standard of care for their symptoms. UVA physicians will assess trial participants each day for changes in their condition. Having scientifically sound information about the effectiveness of remdesivir will be helpful as we seek to provide the best care for patients. Patrick Jackson, the principal investigator for the trial at UVA, said. Of course, Patrick. Totally agree. That would be lovely. Wouldn't it be great if we had that sort of scientifically sound information about the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine, too? Why aren't these two drugs being treated in a similar way by the same institution? It's an important question, and that's why I get into those conflicts of interest. All right, remember, resubscribe to this channel if you need to. People get unsubscribed all the time. Thank you, YouTube, which who knows how long I'm going to be on this channel anyway, because the CEO of YouTube just came out recently and said that anything that runs counter to WHO recommendations is going to be considered fake news and taken down without even laughing when she said that. No smirk. Took it like she believed that was actually, that the WHO was the legitimate organization to follow here. Very odd. Same thing over at Twitter. Okay. Plant a garden. Just do it. All right. There's every chance that we're going to have a shortage of the fresh vegetables and bright sunshine and good air that you will need and receive from your garden if you go ahead and plant a garden. So go ahead and get that thing started. Conclusions for today. Well, new cases took another jump in today's figures. Hydroxychloroquine, you know what? It seems to work in some places like Costa Rica, France, Texas, New York City, many other places. I tons of anecdotes I wasn't able to bring up for you. But these hydroxychloroquine studies that have come out of late are so shoddy. They're actually inexplicably shoddy. I simply don't understand them from a medical standpoint or scientific standpoint. I don't understand them from the scientific method standpoint. They're easy to pick apart, and I'm no expert at these things. I don't get it. The UVA study that on the VA patients was completely useless and added nothing to our understanding. So just if I was a judge, I would say the jury shall ignore all of that and forget it, because it doesn't have any bearing on the trial. And you and I, everybody here listening to this, we deserve to gain the most data on the most treatments as rapidly as possible. I'm not here pushing hydroxychloroquine. I'm here to say we need the data from that, from remdesivir, from all the other antivirals that are going on, the anti-HIV proteases, everything. We deserve all that data and more. I want to see the Chinese herbal medicinals. I don't care at this point. I want what works, and the way you get there is you have randomized trials, and you begin the treatment as soon as possible, and you have to record all this data. Okay? That's how that all works. So, with that, go ahead, plant your garden. Remember, it didn't have to be this way. We can be better than this. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Hi, folks. Adam Taggart here. Chris Martenson and I are the co-founders of Peak Prosperity. If you want to get alerted whenever we release a new video from Chris, just click the red subscribe button right beneath the YouTube video player. Once you've done that, a little bell icon will appear right next to it. Click on that bell. It looks like this. And that's it. The next time we publish a video from Chris, you'll immediately receive a notification from YouTube. Thanks for watching our videos.
Oh, there you go. Matt Miller sitting in for Mike Folk today, who wanted to share with you that video. We are glad that you could join us. Mike will be back with us again as we get back on the air at 3 o'clock on Monday. As we wrap things up from here today, we remind you to once again stay safe and have a good weekend.
The Chinese coronavirus is hurting our economy and our state. It's the thanks we get after China stole our jobs and ripped off our patents. And that's not all. Thrasher and Justice are pushing a deal giving China an $84 billion stake in West Virginia's valuable energy resources. More China scams we don't need. Woody Thrasher and Jim Justice, two China sellouts. First, Justice and Thrasher pushed the biggest tax hike ever. Then Thrasher and Justice endorsed bringing refugees to West Virginia. And now an $84 billion sellout to China. Stop them. Mike Folk for governor, the conservative champion to put West Virginia first.
I'm Mike Folk. Justice and Thrasher's $84 billion sellout to China is even worse than their taxes and open border policies. West Virginia needs a governor who will put West Virginia first. I'm Mike Folk, Republican for governor. That's why I'm running.
Mike Folk for governor, the conservative champion to put West Virginia first. Paid for by Folk for governor.
Howdy, cowpokes. Do your business cards look like they were designed by a coat roper? Well, this cowboy knows the advantage of dealing with folks the old-fashioned way. When you order printed material on the internet, you're stuck with what you get. But when you need printed material to look just right, you want to deal with folks you know. And that's what you'll find at Panhandle Printing and Design. Local folks that have been delivering results for years. They can help with everything from design to production of stationery envelopes, business cards, invitations, vinyl signs, banners, vehicle wraps, and a lot more. They can answer all your printing questions, and you can call them on the phone or hop on your horse and go see them, because they're your one-stop printing shop where they have something for everyone. Panhandle Printing and Design at 124 North Maple Avenue in Martinsburg. Call 304-267-7400. You can even find them online, too, if you want to. If you need printed materials, don't deal with some city slicker you'll never meet. Trust the folks at Panhandle Printing and Design.
Serving local clients since 1997 with a reputation of quality, creativity, and personal touch. Let Pro Design build or redesign your dream website. Find them online at professionaldesign.com or phone 304-676-9940.
With 4 new car dealerships and 4 used car dealerships in 3 states, Parsons is the largest used car and fastest growing new car dealer in the tri-state area. Take Parsons Ford with huge savings on hundreds of new Fords, financing from 0%, Parsons' goal of financing for all, and Parsons' famous above-market trade-in allowances that help make Parsons #1 for used cars, too. See why so many won't buy anywhere but Parsons Ford in Martinsburg. We became #1 by making you #1 first. Parsons.
Songs as I write you this letter, of days past and days yet to come, and the message of freedom, the message of freedom. I stand at the edge of the pages and lessons unlearned. It feels like these pages are remaining unturned, but boys, it's no mystery. Children, I'm sorry to leave you this world in a state of disaster. It was given